And this is a book that is set in post-wartime Chicago, and it centers around a 16-year-old named Beatrice Pryor, and she faces a huge life decision. She has lived her entire life in an abnegation faction, which is one of the 5 factions in the book. And as a result of turning 16, she is given a test, an aptitude test, and she is given the opportunity to choose her new faction, where she will spend the rest of her life as a result of what the aptitude test tells her. And so she's really looking forward to the aptitude test that she's going to be given because it's going to tell her finally, okay, this is where you belong and this is where you're supposed to be. And she's always kind of felt like she doesn't really fit into abnegation. Abnegation is a faction that is completely devoted to being selfless, and she doesn't really see all of that in herself. So she goes to take this test, and the test is going to tell her which faction she is going to fit into. So there's Amity, which is dedicated to kindness, Dauntless, which is dedicated to bravery, Erudite, which is dedicated to knowledge, and then Candor, which is dedicated to the truth. And so she and all of the other 16-year-olds in this post-wartime Chicago go to take this aptitude test to tell them which faction they belong to. And when Beatrice takes this test, her results come out inconclusive. And so they don't really know what to tell her to do. And so Tori, who's administering the test for her, says, you know, you're going to have to choose what you want to do, but whatever you do, don't tell anybody the results of these tests. And so then she's faced with this huge choice. What am I going to do? I'm not really sure. And so eventually she chooses to go to Dauntless, and she has to go through initiation and all of those good kinds of things. But the interesting thing about these factions is that they all seek to foster one part of humanity. So with her being in the Dauntless faction, it's just the bravery is what they're really focusing on, but they kind of neglect the other important aspects of humanity. And they do this because each of the factions believe that one of these key ideas is what was lacking and what caused war. So they think by devoting themselves to that one thing, they will be able to prevent war for the rest of the lifetime. And so they go through and they're going through all of the initiation and stuff. And what happens as a result of this factioned world is that a war does break out, and only Beatrice and Four, who is another character in the book, are able to combat that. And so the way in which this all goes about is really, really interesting. And so I'm going to read an excerpt, and it's in Divergent, and this is in the Dauntless faction, and Beatrice and a couple other of the initiates are talking, and something really bad has just happened, and somebody has actually died as a result of what's going on, and this is what Beatrice has to say. I don't want to cry for Edward, at least not in the deep, personal way that you cry for a friend or loved one. I want to cry because something terrible happened, and I saw it, and I could not see a way to mend it. No one who would want to punish Peter has the authority to, and no one who has the authority to punish him would want to. The Dauntless have rules against attacking someone like that, but with people like Eric in charge, I suspect those rules go unenforced. I say more seriously, the most ridiculous part is, in any other faction, it would be brave for us to tell someone what happened. But here, in Dauntless, bravery won't do us any good. Have you ever read the faction manifestos? Says Will. The faction manifestos were written after the factions formed. We learned about them in school, but I never read them. You have? I frowned at him. Then I remember that Will once memorized a map of the city. For fun. And I say, oh, of course you have. Never mind. One of the lines I remember from the Dauntless Manifesto is, we believe in ordinary acts of bravery, in the courage that drives one person to stand up for another. Will sighs. He doesn't need to say anything else. I know what he means. Maybe Dauntless was formed with good intentions, with the right ideals and the right goals, but it has strayed far from that. And the same is true of Erudite. I realize. A long time ago, erudite pursued knowledge and ingenuity for the sake of doing good. Now they pursue knowledge and ingenuity with greedy hearts. I wonder if the other factions suffer from the same problem. I had not thought about it before. Despite the depravity I see in Dauntless, though, I could not leave it. It isn't only because the thought of living factionless in complete isolation sounds like a fate worse than death. It is because, in the brief moments that I have loved it here, I saw a faction worth saving. Maybe we can become brave and honorable again. Let's go to the cafeteria, Will says, and eat cake. Okay, I smile. As we walk toward the pit, I repeat the line Will quoted to myself, so I don't forget it. I believe in ordinary acts of bravery, in the courage that drives one person to stand up for another. It is a beautiful thought. Awards that this book has received, it's a Goodreads Choice Award for 2011, and then it's also on the New York Times bestseller. But it's kind of hard to have a lot of awards for this book because it is fairly new. And then as an extension activity, I think it would be really great to have students focus on this in the genre of like a science fiction study. And I really like the dystopia aspect of the novel, and it really seems to be a type of literature that is more prevalent and that it's gaining more respect and being studied more often. And so I think that it would be great for students to be able to combine this reading with a writing activity where they would be able to look at this novel and say, okay, here is how I see a dystopia novel, here's examples, this is the way in which the author has really set the stage for this to become that type of novel, and then to be able to say, okay, now create your own dystopia, probably just a short story because I'm not going to have my students write a novel, but incorporating some of those aspects. And then I think it would also be really cool. This novel is set in post-wartime Chicago, so it's got an actual setting that students are able to kind of relate to, but then there's kind of, it's taken back a little bit because they obviously can't relate to a Chicago that we don't even see at this point. And so to use their hometowns as the city in which this dystopia society has kind of been formed, I think would be a really interesting extension to the novel. And then also, this book has been recently made into a film, and it's actually still in theaters, so it's fairly new. But to have students read the book and then watch the movie and see those similarities and then those differences, but then also be able to to say, hey, this is similar, these are the similarities and these are the differences, but also just to kind of bring the book alive and allow students to see it, I think would also be a really good opportunity for them to kind of connect the literature to their daily lives and to who they are at this time and who they're growing to become. Overall, I thought it was a really good book, and I was very captivated by it, not even just a book that I think my students will enjoy. So I really like that aspect, and I definitely recommend checking it out. I plan on teaching high school English, and so I would definitely say that it's more 9th through 12th grade based, and I wouldn't, give it to a 4th or a 5th grader and expect them to read it. But I do think that it is a really interesting novel, and I think there are a lot of interesting applications for it inside the classroom.